We're living in an era where information has completely reshaped our world, becoming our most valuable resource. And this digital revolution is changing everything, including the very nature of law itself. So the big question is, how does legal education keep up? This explainer is based on the works of Professor Kiskinov, and together we're going to explore his insights on preparing lawyers for this brand new reality. So here's our game plan. First up, we'll get a handle on the new legal reality we find ourselves in. Then we'll look at the growing gap that's forming in legal education. After that, we'll talk about why just adding more courses isn't the answer, before we get to a new blueprint for what a modern lawyer should be. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at what all of this means for the future of the entire legal profession. All right, let's dive into our first section, a new legal reality. Because before we can even begin to talk about fixing legal education, we really need to understand just how deeply our digital world is rewriting the fundamental rules of law. At the very core of this change is this concept of the information society. Unlike the industrial age, which was all about physical things, our society is now built on intangibles. We're talking about data, software, our digital identities. Information is now the most critical resource, and our legal systems are basically in a constant race to keep up. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This slide shows how the whole function of law is evolving. Historically, law was kind of like a referee. Its job was to step in and resolve disputes over physical things, land, property, goods. But in our information society, law is becoming something else. It's becoming a tool for actively building our virtual world. It's not just a referee enforcing the rules anymore, it's becoming the architect who actually designs the game. So this huge shift from referee to architect, well, it creates a massive challenge for the legal profession. And that brings us right to our second section, education's growing gap. Let's take a look at the growing disconnect between this new reality and how we're currently training our lawyers. And listen, this isn't just some abstract academic problem. The view from the front lines is crystal clear. A survey of actual legal practitioners found that almost 68%, that's more than 2/3, believe that modern legal education is just not meeting modern needs and has to be updated. That is a massive signal that the system is seriously out of sync with what's happening in the real world. This quote really gets to the heart of the matter. The legal profession itself is the one calling for this change. These are the people who see the impact of technology every single day, and they're asking for an education that's enriched with topics that are both theoretical and, this is the key part, applied. They need graduates who can walk in on day one, ready to handle electronic registers, e-governance, and digital contracts. So if practitioners are demanding an update, what's the fix? Well, here's the crucial point. We can't solve this by just cramming more courses into the curriculum, and that brings us to our third section. Quantity versus quality. The issue isn't just about the volume of new regulations. It's a fundamental change in the very nature, the quality of legal action itself. You see, just tacking on a cyber law course and calling it a day completely misses the point. The real challenge is that a whole new quality has popped up in how law works. The virtual and the physical worlds, they aren't separate anymore. They're merging into this single hybrid legal reality. And that requires a totally different way of thinking, not just more facts to memorize. Let's make this concrete. Professor Kiskinov calls this a mixed factual composition. Think about something like buying a house. Okay, you've got the traditional physical stuff, signing papers, handing over the keys. But now, an absolutely essential part of that process is digital, checking an electronic property register. The legal facts of that sale now exist in both the physical world and the virtual world at the same time. This merged reality, well, that's the new normal. And this new merged reality, it obviously demands a new kind of lawyer. So how do we train them? That takes us to the solution in Section 4, a blueprint for a lawyer. Here we're going to lay out Professor Kiskinov's model for what a future-proof legal education could look like. The model he proposes is a really big shift. First, it prioritizes teaching legal methodology, that's the how to think and how to build part, over just memorizing content. It uses complete theoretical models to show how law works as a whole system. And maybe most importantly, it brings in practical assignments using the exact same digital tools that lawyers use every day, making sure there's a direct, unbroken line between theory and practice. Ultimately, the goal here is nothing less than a profound transformation. Legal science has to move past just being a discipline that comments on and organizes existing laws. It needs to become a constructive science, one that gives lawyers the skills to actually design and build the legal frameworks that will run our digital future. They need to be the architects, remember, not just the referees. Turning legal science into a constructive science has some pretty huge implications. And that brings us to our final section, where we'll look ahead at the future of law. What does this transformation really mean for the profession as a whole? If you take one thing away from all of this today, let it be this. For legal education to work in the information society, it can't be purely theoretical or stuck in silos. It has to be systemic, teaching law as one big, interconnected system. It has to be methodological, focusing on skills, not just memorization. And it has to be directly, deeply tied to practice, putting the digital tools of the trade right into the heart of the learning process. And I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. As we head into a future where legal systems can be designed, modeled, and even built like pieces of software, we have to ask a very fundamental question. What is the lawyer's ultimate role in a world they're not just interpreting, but actively building?